Hello everybody, this is the iPhone channel here. So you'd actually seen the iPhone 16 and 16 Plus review, but now I'm going to review to you guys the iPhone 16 Pro and the iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now both of these phones are actually the most popular iPhones in the Apple lineup, and that is because when I went shopping for an iPhone about 1.5 weeks ago, I did have to go to another store to get these 16 Pro and 16 Pro Maxes, as they actually ran out of stock in Salem, New Hampshire, so I had to drive all the way to Massachusetts, which actually imposes a sales tax to actually even find one of these. And I was actually lucky to even find the 16 Pro Max at Burlington. Otherwise, I would have to drive all the way to Marlboro, which is actually more of a triangle than a straight line. And I was so blessed to actually find these two phones, even though I did get higher storage configurations rather than the base ones, as the base ones actually did sell out. So why not, let's begin. So let's start out with the colors. As you can see, there are actually 4 colors. There's a titanium, natural titanium, white titanium, and of course black titanium. And this is actually natural titanium, whilst this is actually black titanium over here. Now, as you can see, there are actually a lot more premium colors on the Pro models compared to the regular models, where they actually do have some bit more fun colors, such as you guess the blue or pink or anything. But in reality, this is aimed towards more serious users than like say the millennials or something. But in reality, many millennials and Gen Z actually do buy the Pro models, even if the regular 16 and the regular variants of the iPhone is targeted more towards the hipsters. And then we start with the price. The iPhone 16 Pro starts at $999 for the base 128GB storage variant, whilst the 16 Pro Max actually starts at $1199 for the 256GB variant, as there is actually no base 128GB variant on the Pro Max. And the storage actually goes up to about 512 gigs and 1 terabyte on both iPhones. And unlike the regular iPhone models, none of these phones are actually marked up $30 for the unlocked variant. Now, even though these two phones are the same, they're actually different screen sizes, as the 16 Pro regular only have a 6.3-inch display, which is actually an upgrade from last year's 15 Pro, as the 15 Pro only had a 6.1-inch, whilst the 16 Pro Max actually has a 6.9-inch, which is actually double the size of that of the original iPhone. Actually nearly, but we could consider it double, as the original iPhone actually had a 3.5-inch display. But still, this 16 Pro Max is actually an upgrade from, you guessed it, the 15 Pro Max, as the 15 Pro Max only has, you guessed it, a 6.7-inch. But still, these two phones actually do have quite big screens. Now, both phones are actually 460 pixels per inch, and the Pro Max actually has a bigger battery at 4685 milliamp hours versus 3582 milliamp hours on the 16 Pro. And as you can see, there is actually some battery drain. I actually did charge both of them to full, but there's actually more battery drain on the 16 Pro than the 16 Pro Max. And yeah, in the back, nothing has changed. As you can see, with a 3-camera cutout just like that of the 15 Pro series, and even 14 Pro, and of course even 13 Pro. As you can see, not much has changed. Nor in the USB-C category did anything change, because there's actually USB 3.0 with the transfer speed of up to, you guessed it, 10 gigabits per second. And as for brightness, it is rudimentary. Nothing really has changed at all. It still supports up to 1000 nits in typical environments like indoors and stuff, 1600 nits in HDR, and of course 2000 nits outdoors. So nothing has really changed in this department. Yes, as you can see, this is actually the max brightness in typical environments. And as for design, both phones are actually made of titanium on the sides, but in the back it is actually matte glass, which is actually ceramic shield, so it's quite durable when you were to drop it, especially compared with some of the older iPhones. And of course, there's actually IP68 water resistance rating, where you could actually drop these two phones in the water for like 30 minutes in 6 meters of water and nothing would happen. But I would assume this is actually H2O water, because if you were to drop it in the sea, of course it might break, because in the sea there are actually many different minerals instead of just pure H2O. And yeah, both do have an action button over here. The second generation of iPhones actually includes the action button And of course, there's actually an OLED display on both phones. And yes, 120 Hz ProMotion is actually included, unlike the regular 16. And if you were to put the phone to sleep, there is actually always on display. The third generation of iPhones to include always on display. And now let's move on to the processor. Sorry. And here it is. Because I already tested the CPU and GPU, why not? Let's see the CPU history. And these are the scores over here. Not much discrepancies between the two phones, obviously, because both do have an A18 Pro with 6 cores, 2 performance cores, which are actually 4.04 gigahertz, and 4 efficiency cores, which are 2.3 gigahertz. There's actually 8 gigs of RAM on all 4 iPhone 16 variants, as well as 2 iPhone 15 Pro variants. And there's also a 6-core GPU. So let's see the GPU results. And over here it is, not much discrepancy between the two phones. And even though these two phones have the same performance, the iPhone 16 Pro Max does have a significantly longer battery than that of the 16 Pro. So if you want a bigger battery, then buy the 16 Pro Max. Because as you can see, there is actually noticeable battery drain on the 16 Pro, just like in the last video where I actually compared all 4 iPhone 16 variants. And speaking of which, the charging speeds. Both phones could actually support up to 45 watt wired charging, up from 27 watts from the 15 series. And both phones could actually support up to 25 watts on the MagSafe wireless adapter. And if you were to charge from like a 20 watt brick, then they would both take around like 30 minutes to actually charge from 0 to 50, and around 90 minutes to actually charge the full. So basically, I know many of you guys would actually buy the 20 watt charger because they're actually diminishing returns to buying the 45 watt charger. Kind of like the fact they're diminishing returns of using a level 3 supercharger or EV charger on the Tesla, such as the Tesla supercharger or Electrify America, compared to using a municipal charger like say the Cambridge municipal chargers, of which I use like quite often. Not just in terms of battery degradation, but also, you guessed it, the price. But with the fast chargers, it is only more expensive up front. And yes, despite quite little improvements on both of the iPhones compared to the 15 Pro series and even 14 Pro series, because the 15 Pro series has not really changed much, there is actually, you guessed it, Wi-Fi 7 support. Just like the fact the 15 Pro does include Wi-Fi 6E, the 16 does take it a step further and actually includes Wi-Fi 7 802.11be standard. But because Bluetooth 6 has not been officially out yet, hence these two phones are stuck with Bluetooth 5.3. But I'm quite excited to see what Bluetooth 6 is all about. And both of these phones do support the 2nd gen ultra-wideband chip. And of course, you guessed it, they're eSIM only in the US. Even though like other countries, like iPhones still include like a SIM card, the 14 series actually ditched the SIM card in favor of eSIM only. Even though the eSIM was actually unveiled as early as the iPhone XS back in 2018. And last up, let's move to cameras, as the camera has actually improved just like every iteration of iPhone, as the iPhone 16 Pro series does have a 48 megapixel 1.78 aperture as the primary camera without any conversion to 24 megapixels, and has the more advanced 2nd generation center chip optical image stabilization as opposed to just regular optical image stabilization on the regular 16 series, and also adaptive True Tone flash, just like that of the 15 Pro series, unlike that of, you guessed it, the iPhone 16 regular, which only has True Tone flash. And there's actually 5x optical zoom, and I really hope there's actually 10x optical zoom, because I've actually seen like such optical zoom on like the Galaxy series since the S20. And if you were to go digital zoom, then you could zoom up to 25%. Unfortunately, there's no space zoom, unlike that of the S20 series and Samsung's other phones. And I actually record this on a Samsung. And of course, there's actually, you guessed it, ultra wide lens. And let me tell you guys about the ultra wide camera. It is actually a 48 megapixel camera with an aperture of 2.2, and there's also a macro camera also with an aperture of 2.2, and there's also second generation portraits. And of course, let's go to the telephoto camera, because the telephoto camera was first introduced during the 7 Plus, which is actually 8 years ago in 2016. And the telephoto camera is actually a 12 megapixel camera with an aperture of 2.8. So why not? Let's check the camera performance. And finally, there is actually a camera button over here on the 16 as well as the 16 Pro. So why not? You could actually adjust the zoom with this. Not only take pictures and stuff, but I also do adjust the zoom as well over here. Now starting with the rear cameras, the exposure looks quite accurate and it is not too saturated. And same deal goes for the selfie. As you can see, all the photos are sharp. And then comes the ultra wide lens. And then the zoom, 2x zoom. And this is 5x optical zoom, where the images are quite sharp and not really muted in any way. And over here is the restroom in low light. As you can see, quite a lot of white balance. And here's the outside, where you could actually see good color, accurate exposure, and decent white balance. And the photos here are also sharp as well. This is a 4K 60 frames per second sample between the two different iPhones. Okay guys, now starting with the selfie samples over here. As you can see, on the left is actually the 16 and on the right is the 16 Pro. Okay guys, this is a video recording in the dark. This looks more like it. Yes, it is much better than before, as we did include the flash over here. Finally, I'm going to do an outdoor video sample over here between the 16 Plus and 16 Pro Max. Oops, sorry, we forgot to mention the fact these two phones support up to 4K at 120 frames per second HDR. Yes, they're the two first iPhones to actually support up to 4K at 120 frames per second. So you can actually record 4K slow-mo videos. Only for the back. As for the front, it only supports up to 4K at 60 frames per second. And the front-facing camera is actually a 12 megapixel 1.9 aperture. And both phones do support recording in ProRes. Now let's move on to daily usage. Both of these phones are quite fast, with the iPhone 16 Pro Max having like long battery life, as well as very good performance here and there. You could actually play like complex games, like say, not just Temple Run, of course not, but also you could actually play like some of the more intensive games such as World of Warships and stuff. And not only could you watch YouTube, you could actually enjoy calling and stuff. I actually did use the 15 Pro Max, which is sort of similar, albeit it is a bit slower, but this phone is not going to be much of a difference. It's still going to be really fast and quite smooth in daily usage, and of course even more complex tasks. And the battery could actually last all day or nearly all day, even in heavy usage. Like you could actually wake up at around 7 a.m. and basically use the phone heavily, and then you could actually go all the way into the evening without having to worry much about the charger. Even though you might worry some bits, at least you could actually use it all the way down to zero by the time you get home at around 5 or 6 p.m. and still have like some battery remaining. And now, finally, let's move on to the weight and the size. Both of these phones are actually slightly bigger than that of the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, of course, with a bigger screen. And of course, the bezels are actually thinner than that of the 15 and 15 Pro Max. As you can see, there is actually very, very thin bezels. Even thinner than that of the original iPhone, of course. Yes. And of course, these two phones are quite heavy. Maybe a bit heavier than that of the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, as the iPhone 16 Pro weighs 199 grams, which is ironically the same as the 16 Plus. And the 16 Pro Max weighs 227 grams. So here's the conclusion. Both of these two phones are actually quite decent. They're quite expensive, but I feel like not much has changed compared to the 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max, but in reality there are actually some important changes, notably in the Wi-Fi speeds and stuff. There's some bit of performance increase because of Wi-Fi 7, and also better processor and better camera. It is just more of an iterative upgrade, but in reality it is still an upgrade nonetheless. Is it worth buying? I think it's fine, especially if you want like the best of the best iPhone. But if you want like a decent value without sacrificing too much bank, then I would suggest like searching for an iPhone 15 Pro, 15 Pro Max and Swapper, because they're actually discounted heavily. I actually found some like fair or even good conditions in like the 600s or 700s respectively. And if you want mint condition, then you could actually find a 15 Pro for I think around $750, and a 15 Pro Max for like $860 or $870. So thank you guys for watching. Please give a big thumbs up, subscribe for more videos, and I'm gonna see you guys soon.